Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book about sugar. It's come from the Cambridge University Press, and the title of the book is Sugar and the Making of International Trade Law, and it's been written by Michael Fakhri. This is the actual book here. Let me show it to you first. It's a hardback book. There's the front, there's the spine, and then there's the back. It's not a heavy book. It's running to something like just under 250 odd pages. There is an interesting structure at the back. There is in fact a very useful list of the various books in the series right at the back, and then just before that is the index. It's a relatively short index which you can see. Then after that you've got a very substantial bibliography called Sources and Bibliography. And then you've got the actual front part of the book. This is actually what it says about the book there, which is all on the website. And then this is about this is actually the Cambridge Studies International and Comparative Law group. And as I say, right at the back you have a complete list of all the publications there. There's the front page there. Then you've got the various parts, a prologue to start, in other words an introduction. Then you go into the 1902 Brussels Convention, then various other parts there. You can see various agreements, and then finally an epilogue at the back. There's an acknowledgements, which is there. Very useful abbreviations. We always forget sometimes what the abbreviations really are, so it's useful to know what they stand for. Very few cases, just a couple of cases. Table of agreements, which are listed there as well. And then we go into the prologue, and there's a nice little quote just at the beginning, and then you get into the work itself. There are footnotes, very substantial footnotes, which link into the bibliography at the back. The text, generally speaking, there are no paragraph numbers. There are some sub-paragraph titles and so forth, subheadings, but generally speaking it's just a text all the way through. It's a very interesting book. It's quite a heavy book in some respects, in that it's got a lot of detail, but what struck me as being interesting about this is the issue of sugar is actually quite an important political issue, and this of course is looking at it from a legal perspective and from an international trade point of view, bearing in mind the history of sugar over the centuries. Now my wife Elizabeth and I looked at this book and we came up with a title for it. We said, How Sugar Became an International Commodity, not by machinery but by law. And we described it as a fascinating read for international lawyers and everybody who likes sugar. So we thought we'd just throw that in. Now this is what we say about the book. Sugar, how we crave it, even though we've been warned by the alarmist outpourings of many a food expert that it's not good for us. But as it's ubiquitous, how, you might ask, can we do without it? Whatever your stance on sugar, you might dismiss these musings as tangential once you read this book. It's been published by the Cambridge University Press as part of their Cambridge Studies in International and Comparative Law. There's a bit at the front which explains that study group, and then at the back you've got the list of the other titles in the series. It's presented in a glossy hardback format, and the book is aimed obviously at international and comparative lawyers, although because of our everyday familiarity with this everyday commodity, to be found on tea tables everywhere and in bake-off recipes, those who are non-lawyers and or non-academics might also find themselves captivated by its rather strange fascination, and I certainly am one of them. I was absolutely enthralled by looking at this book. It's a very interesting area for a title. The book offers a clear exposition of the pivotal role played by the sugar trade in trade itself. It's as simple and as complex as that. The author, Michael Fakhri, is a professor of law at the University of Oregon School of Law, and he specialises in food law, agricultural law and international economic law, so he's got a pretty good pedigree in this area. The book is the result of his highly extensive research, and it's very well documented. And it's evidenced obviously as well by the 30-page bibliography. and it's aided in part by two grants, one of them from the Institute for Global Law and Policy at Harvard Law School. Sugar, says Professor Fakhri, was turned into a commodity not through machinery but through law, which created the rules and rules regarding how sugar was produced, sold and bought. In elaborating on this point, he sheds considerable light on the interdependence of industry, agriculture and the law, and the multiplicity of consequences, both positive and negative, of this somewhat startling linkage. Other linkages are postulated throughout the book, which commences with some rather fascinating insights into the history of trade and subsequently the trade in sugar, which is identified as a prime mover of empire, of capitalism as a mode of trade, and lamentably of slavery. There were anti-slavery groups in Britain at the time which boycotted the purchase of sugar. So there's a substantial historic perspective here too. By focusing inquiry on this one agricultural commodity, the book aims to determine how international law, international institutions, capitalism and imperialism are configured. To this end, Fakhri investigates three treaties. He starts with the 1902 Brussels Convention, then the 1937 International Sugar Agreement, and then the 1977 International Sugar Agreement, the ISA, which, quote, maps the world of international trade law through such international trade bodies as the ITO, UN CTAD and GATT. The resulting dynamics are fascinating to contemplate, and there is much contemplation to be had actually in this book, particularly on the mutual interdependence of international trade law within a number of disparate elements. That's historical, sociological, scientific, economic and certainly political, not to mention of course the legal aspect which we're looking at here. This is an interesting analysis which should attract some controversy and, we hope, fuel some debate. It's good to see a work of rigorous scholarship that's also a riveting read. It's not that difficult to read, and of course it's an interesting subject area. We all have had sugar probably at some time in our lives, and we certainly know about it, so it's worth looking at. Let me conclude by saying if you're an international lawyer or doing research, leap out and buy this book now for your professional library. Note the ISBN number, which is 978-1107-040526, and the publication date is cited at the 27th of November 2014. And I'm also mentioning the fact that the book price is £65 in sterling and $99, so it's sort of relatively easy in terms. It's not an expensive book. Anyway, I'd like to thank everybody very much for the work they put into it. There's the book again. Nice, interesting sugar cane at the front there. Spine and back. Just opening it in the middle again, you can see here, this is the post-war institutional landscape. Sugar's had a very interesting history, as I've indicated. It's not just about legal issues, it's also about history. This is the epilogue at the back, which really comes up with some using the past to open up the future of trade law. And again, you can see that we've got things to use. It says here, sugar began its life as a wild grass, and you can see the way it's changed our lives to a certain extent. It's a very small epilogue, so it's well worth reading. And he talks about the transformation of trade law for the future at the end of the book. So he doesn't come up with any particularly firm conclusions, but it's a commodity which is with us. It's a fascinating commodity. This is a fascinating book. Thank you to all concerned for an excellent publication. Bye-bye.